I wanted to just say that really the MBI piece of work is extremely useful because it really digs down into a technical level that I think we haven't done in this country. I myself have managed quite a few modeling projects, and one knows that the assumptions and the algorithms and the rigor of those and the orientation of those and who believes them and doesn't believe them, inform what a model spits out. So I do think it's important, and certainly the MBI has offered us the opportunity to dig into those. I think what that is a model of is what business is willing to do and thinks is feasible. And I understand experts were drawn in and so on, but I mean, as Joanne said, it is a business view, and it's very useful to understand that. But I also think the NPC did the most thoroughgoing, deep consultation with people, which I haven't seen the like of in the 11 years I've been working in this space. And we should not lose the benefits that that has delivered to us, and specifically the vision in the MPC final document. I almost think, that the Commission must adopt that wholeheartedly. That vision is not something we should restart a whole process and take another further 2 years to agree with each other on. I think we should take it as read that it was deeply consulted. And then I want to just say, if we look at work, it's my second last point, Chair. If we look at really good work that has been done, I want to draw our attention to the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment's work. They did something called the Pathways 2050 work. Very rigorous modeling and scenarios work, which I think could stand us in good stead as, something to bounce the NBI work off and to draw on as well. And very interestingly in there, they took also one of the scenarios comes at it from the consumption-based angle. And I think that, the IPCC special report does indicate that if we're to get to net zero by 2050, we are also going to have to deal with consumption. And consumption is actually where the justice angles also find uptake, because that's energy access, food security, water access, and so on. And then they also commissioned these sector job resilience plans, which are really good pieces of work by TIPS, the Trade and Industry Policy Studies Unit organization, which takes a political economy approach, because one can do nice calculations with technical feasibility and numbers and so on. But actually, I think we all understand an economy, there's a structure to the economy that we're fairly locked into, that they power dynamics within that, their vested interests, and they really looked in a very technical and practical way, but looking at it more in that way than just algorithms. So I think those are really important pieces of work that we should entertain here at the Commission.
Thank you, Louise.
I wanted to say one final thing, Chair, but if you rule me out, then that's...
Go ahead, quickly.
So I'm just concerned that the Commission mustn't work looking backwards into the future. So, one has to balance the pragmatism of, look, this is realistically where we are. This is what is practically feasible. These are the steps business is willing to take. But that should not hold us hostage. What we really need to say is we know we have to get to this place. We have to get to net zero by 2050. We have to get to certain justice elements which are in the NPC vision. And so we have to get there. So what are we going to creatively and with adventure and knowledge bring to make that happen? Not to just think of incremental, from where we are. We have to balance both of those. And I really think that besides this end goal of net zero by 2050, the science says we have to do scale and speed. And we're not going to get if we are too attached, to what incumbents say is possible. So I'll just make a quick example, picking up from, was it Mr. Nzimande? No, I can't remember who, but somebody spoke about plastics. Now, plastics are, made from oil and other fossil fuels. And you are not going to find the solutions which displace plastics from the plastics industry. So, that is an example where one really has to go and look in innovative places for the alternatives and the solutions. Thank you for allowing me to go on.
So the hearings that we had planned on the 7th are designed to get consolidated views from the different social partners. So organized business, organized labor, NGOs, some of the science-based organizations. And we are running it as a facilitated workshop. So we're using an external facilitator. We will break out into rooms during the workshop. So we're going to take a deep dive into the 3 areas of mitigation, adaptation, and means of implementation. And our objective with the workshop is to map out very clearly where there is broad consensus between the social partners and what the main areas of difference are. In parallel to that, we've been mobilizing the technical support that would answer key technical questions that the commissioners raise or that need to be addressed as part of the social dialogue, and would feed that into the commission meeting on the 4th of June, which will then consider and come up with a recommendation. So the idea is that the commission's report or recommendation to government would go beyond just what social partners are saying, and it would take a view on some of the core issues, particularly the trajectory, the level of ambition, the climate finance to back it, the adaptation strategy.
So the 4th of June meeting will take a decision on the NDCs. And from what you are saying, now, any good CEO, as you know, would not go into that meeting without knowing what the outcome is going to be. And so I'm going to depend on you and your team, supported by a lot of the commissioners, to work out what's going to happen at that meeting before we arrive there, because to go into that blind and hope that we have a debate going all over the show and we can come up with a decision will be too risky. So, so I think there should be maximum consultation between the commissioners prior to, so that we have an idea as to what is possible, or whether maybe the commission can't come to a decision. So. But as I say, that I'm hoping that that we would work in that way. Yep. All right, so let's go. Princess Nkambule, do you want to come in next?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief. I think I've taken note that I think most of the issues we'll discuss during the 4th of June. But I just want to maybe support. I really appreciate the NBI's very technical report. We need that moving forward. But what the point that I want to bring, I think, is what the NPC outlined very clearly, that we need an inclusive approach. I would have appreciated that from the onset, that study, showed the integration of all parties, how to bring in labor, civil society, big business, and small business. I would have loved to hear, what the CEOs of those large organizations as plans are to harness, the talent and the innovation which is there in small businesses. because we all know about that's how that's localization of opportunities, that's empowerment of small businesses. So I'm not getting the feel of that. So it's something that I would love us to look at, Chair. I gave an example, for example, of the biodigester, which is I think there's a similar technology in India. I said, there's a way, that's one way of creating clean gas. Because I also agree, I mean, gas, yes, we need the gas, but we can start in a small way, to look into clean gas. What is big business, approach in terms of assisting those small businesses which have made inroads, in their small ways, by in all of us, achieving the target, that is set for us as a country. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. You make me think that there is probably room for a discussion between the various people from the private sector on our commission to talk about how is it that the energy transition will create opportunities for small businesses. I think that there's probably a discussion there that needs to be had, and maybe we should encourage that to happen. Let's go on to Enos Mbodi.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thanks for the beautiful presentations, informative. I just want to raise a flag on something that I've heard on the first presentation by Tasneem. I want us to have a proper look at how coordinated transition is. Insofar as having the labor plans and social plans absent when there is implementation of, for instance, closure of power stations. I think it's something that we need to be able to manage. From this point where we are now, I believe we are better placed to have a bird's view over everything that has to do with transition, so that we may not have just transition well defined but badly implemented. It will be a very, very bad deal for the workers and the working class and the poor. That's the point that I wanted to raise. Thank you.
Jessica Naidu.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for indulging me. Just a few points quickly. One, I haven't yet mastered the art of drinking from a fire hydrant, and today has been really rich, so it's going to take a while to assimilate it. But there are 2 points I want to make. The first is that, we have to resist the temptation just to build on the building blocks that are already there, even if they're excellent. One of the things that we have to do is to give ourselves the space to re-examine some of the issues. And also to take into account some factors that clearly are not in the debate already. I mean, for example, IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, has done some interesting work on the change in the geopolitics on the back of renewable energy. It's going to change very drastically, for example, the trade relations in the world. And I don't see how that has been absorbed into the way we're discussing our South African strategy yet. So my pitch is that I hear what Bobby Peake is saying about us having a good debate and a solid debate around what we mean by the just transition. I agree. I would add that maybe we need to have a pretty resilient discussion around how we read the current situation analysis, because I don't think we all are on the same starting blocks. I mean, we're talking about an industrialization lock-in when we have huge idle assets and resources in the system. We were at 50% employment in this country, which means we have a 50% availability to experiment with a completely different industrial paradigm. Now, I know it's a much more sophisticated discussion, but I think that we must create the space where we can unpack that a little bit. And the last thing, if I may, a question for Thuli on her presentation. The last NDC that South Africa put out according to the Climate Action Tracker, put us in the range of what they call highly insufficient. What do these new numbers mean? Do we get much more into the green space on that tracker? Thank you, Chair.
Desikan, can I just ask you for clarity? You said that we must not just accept what the work that is being done up to now, something of that sort. You're but too coded for me. Just tell me exactly what are you saying? Just be a bit more direct so that I understand you.
Well, I think it would be dangerous for us to take as a given that we have the right starting blocks on our analysis. A lot of the analysis that has been done already have been done in two houses. One of those houses, and I'm part of that house, are the people who are broadly under the banner of environmental activism. And we take a lot of scientific information and we put it out in a very particular way. Another block that Joanne has introduced now is the very practical world of big industry, captains of industry, but industry that is built very, very firmly on a fossil fuel base. And I think we need to organize ourselves to think about the other ways we need to be looking at this as well. Because hopefully we're talking about a future that looks very different from the present and different from the past. And I think we have to push ourselves a little bit further on how we digest that information. So I think it needs that kind of debate, Vali.
Okay,
Is that less coded?
You're still being rather subtle, but I understand now what you're saying.
Okay.
You're saying basically that we shouldn't be blindly led by business interests alone. That's what you're trying to say. And particularly the interest of those who are highly invested in fossil fuels. I think that's what you're trying to say, and that's a fair point to make. I think I hear that. I hear other speakers also having hinted on something similar, and we're going to have to watch for that. Let me just say that I'm really impressed with the NBI presentation. I mean, I just talk frankly, as you know. I'm really impressed with it. Maybe I'm not clever enough not to be impressed with it. But what I've seen on many occasions is big global consultancy firms put together scenarios for various clients, which happens to be government and often large global businesses and such things. And if you ask two different sets of global consultants to put together scenarios, you're going to get two different scenarios. And so it doesn't concern me that the NBI work is coming from business. I think it's good. I don't think you're going to get detailed work coming from anywhere else other than from business. That's where the intellectual capital of industry lies, and that's where it should come from. I think it's fair. When I say business, I'm including the state-owned enterprises also. But I think that, so we should look at that very seriously, but it will be good to have not just one set of one intellectual pool giving us a scenario. I think that, our work is big, it's long term, and we should be sure that we have looked at alternatives quite seriously. And the alternative is not just to say, you're going too fast, you're going too slow, gas is as bad as coal, so why are we going for gas? It's not as simple as that. It needs to be detailed work also. So that's something that I haven't formulated my thoughts on it, but I think it's something we as a commission should think about. But let's hear what Melissa has got to say from the Southern Cape. Are you on holiday, Melissa?
Well, it's the school holiday though. We only have like 1 week of school holiday this whole year because of COVID. So that is why I'm here. And interrupting my holiday to join the commission meeting today.
We appreciate that.
I couldn't, it is a privilege. I couldn't agree more with the last comment you made, Deputy Chair. The reality is that consultants are not neutral either. And many of consulting firms like Boston Consulting Group act for and represent and are briefed for and paid for by big fossil fuel industry. So that is also part of the reason for the motivation I made earlier. On the issues of the NDC, perhaps you needed to give a chance to Dr. Kamala just to answer that question about the climate action tracker. I feel like this is not the opportunity for a detailed discussions on the NDCs. We'll do that next week, Friday. But I feel like I should also just, because we are speaking in the public and people are watching us, just put a peg in the ground to say that as civil society organizations, we do, of course, not think that the draft updated NDCs are ambitious enough. We disagree that it represents South Africa's fair share, and we don't think it prepares us properly for the just transition. We obviously will submit detailed comments to the department and all that stuff, and we can discuss that next week. I happen to have that climate action tracker information handy, and I just want to share with you what their updated assessment is, which is that they have found that the draft updated NDC's upper target is insufficient in their category, and the lower level target is 2 degrees compatible. And their conclusion is the proposed NDC update represents progress beyond its previous submission, but may still not be compatible with limiting global warming to 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, let alone with the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degree limit. So I just want to put that on the record, please, and then we'll discuss that at the next meeting. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Minister Mantashe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. I just want to raise 2 small issues. The transition is not going to be a one-way street like in Joburg. You know, when you're from Kala, where I come from, and you go to Joburg, you get into the street and you see cars coming your way and they flicker you. You think that they are greeting you. That is the danger of a one-way street if you enter into the wrong street.
Minister, your camera is off. I don't know if that's deliberate.
Is it off? Yeah. I'm sure it's the work of the host.
Ah, there it is. We can see you now. Wonderful.
Now, the point I'm making, Chairperson, is that you are from some back room type of a place called Kala, and you come to Joburg. You're driving a car, you enter a street from the opposite side is a one-way, and the cars coming your way flicker you to tell you that you're in a wrong street. You get so proud to say to the people who are your passenger, listen, they're greeting me, they know me. You are in trouble. Let's disabuse ourselves of a one-way approach. Oil and gas are going to be a reality in the transition. And we must actually talk about how do we manage it. It's lower carbon emission than coal. Then we're on the road somewhere. And the whole day, nobody talked about what role can nuclear play. Because nuclear is a clean energy. But if we say nothing and nothing except PV and wind, I think we're going to run into problems, you know. Unfortunately, researchers sometimes research and never give us the research. Germany did that. All of a sudden, they're delaying their movement away from coal power stations because they discovered in their experiment, they can do that, they have money. They discovered that they have the energy and it's become expensive because they don't have a base load. All those issues must be put on the table and must discuss them. We must discuss them because if we don't, we're going to have this commission as a forum for lobbying instead of developing a strategy that is comprehensive, that takes us from point X to point Y. And that is my only appeal. International forums, everybody now almost accept that nuclear must be part of cleaner energy. And in South Africa, there's been a big noise about the cost. And always explain to them, yes, nuclear is quite expensive at the commissioning stage and maybe at decommissioning. But when it is operational, it is very efficient. That's why in South Africa today, the lowest cost energy is from Quebec. And we're not talking about it. I know that at one point, everybody attacked nuclear because there was this proposal of 9,600. That was a project that was rejected, but the technology remains relevant. And I'm putting that on the table for experts that are here to guide us. I'm a social scientist. I heard you saying you are a scientist. You are a natural scientist. I'm a social scientist. And therefore, social science is not an exact science. That's why we can play around with issues. Okay, thank you.
I think, Minister, look, I think I want to just agree with you fully that as a commission, when we put our name to something, it will have to be based on proper calculations and proper science and proper economics. That we can't just say something which is a wish or that's not based on economics. So I just want to assure you, I don't think that there's anybody in the commission would want to do anything other than that. Let's take Minister Dlamini Zuma.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering whether we are looking at using some of the biomass for energy, but also I've seen some of the industries that turn waste into energy. So maybe especially in the municipal spaces, we should be looking at creating some of those industries that can turn what we throw away and into energy, thus creating jobs, but also looking at alternate energy. And of course, yeah, maybe I should leave it at that, because it's something that can be creating new jobs, rather than we must save the ones that are there, but we must be creating new jobs even in that space and using what we have, and especially in the local sphere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Somebody else may be more informed about it, but we already have some small scale biomass to energy plants that are in operation. And if I'm not mistaken, the Department of Energy has it as part of its plan. It has some sort of calculation as far as that is concerned, but somebody else maybe could speak on it more intelligently. Let's take Mr. Happy Kambule.
Thank you, Chair. I think look, there's been a lot that's been said, but I'd like to focus on two aspects, largely on the NDC presentation, or just that NDC overview. I take it that we will, as the Commission, have a much more thorough, in-depth presentation on the NDC. I think there's some things that are still missing, and not, I say missing meaning missing in the context of what we heard. And I know the last time we had something along these lines from the department, it was much longer and much more thorough. From the top of the head, in terms of the mitigation component in the NDC, it is clear, especially from what Commissioner Melissa had indicated, that there are numerous international, including national institutions that are really sure that our contribution is insufficient with regards to the mitigation component. When it comes to the adaptation side, in terms of the draft, a lot, yes, can still be done, but that is much more stronger than the mitigation part. So we need to be working a lot more to signal that our transition is also consummate with the need to reduce our emissions. Because now what we are doing, and I think it's part of the conversation, is that we're premising the just transition outside of the climate discussion, and we're seeing it chiefly as just a means of finding new jobs, protecting jobs, and trying to make sure that the disruptions within the economy are somehow mitigated, whilst the imperative of the just transition is coming from, yes, a socio-economic aspect, but largely from the environmental imperative of climate change. So we have to mitigate, but whilst we're mitigating, we need to make sure that the socio-economic conditions that our country is in are being addressed. It's not the other way around. So there would have not been a just transition if there wasn't the imperative of climate change in this case. In the second piece, in terms of the means of the NDC, the means of implementation seem to be quite broad in terms of what the figure is. We're talking about $8 billion US for to effect the NDC, but we're not sure to what aspects that $8 billion is talking to. Currently, we know that we had $2 billion that was raised, but we're not sure what aspects of that $2 billion actually helped us to achieve the current emission reductions. We don't even know which particular policy levers and policy interventions that we've been developed within South Africa led us to the current emission reduction trajectory that we have, which is way below, or rather, which is below the upper range of the peak, plateau, and decline trajectory that we currently have. Then, in terms of the discussion that is starting to emerge, which is born from the NDI pathway discussion, I think we need to have another longer conversation and more presentation on the NDI pathway, and we need to have a subsequent NPC presentation as well, so that we can try to marry these two, because it's fine to get the presentations, but we need to know what next. What do we do with this information? How do we incorporate it? And how do we operationalize what we agree on? So I think if we have those focused conversations, it will make things a little bit easier. And lastly, with regards to the different technology options that we are proposing, or that have been proposed and that we are discussing, I think we are very fine, okay, to discuss what the IRP is, because as the minister has said, that this is that is the policy instrument we're using. However, at a broader level, at the energy level, we don't have a plan. We do not have the integrated energy plan, which talks to liquid fuels within transportation and to the other diversified end use for energy that we need, like heating, like for other people who are using it for cooking, whether it's gas, coal, or the others which are not necessarily electricity, which forms within the integrated resource plan. So we need to start looking at the current policy instruments that are there, and which ones are missing in order to give direction to the discussions that we already have. And if it is the case that they will not be coming up, depending on whatever the discussion is, we need to find a way, because we are speaking about electricity, we are speaking about liquid fuels, transportation and whatnot, but we don't have the things that are pinning it primarily on what do we want to do with electric vehicles, as in the NDI presentation said, because liquid fuels are a big proportion of our emissions profile. So there are things that we are still missing, but I believe that the Commission, as we go through the work, will be able to address them. Thank you, Chair.
Now, Happy, has anybody told you that we can't see you clearly? You look like you're sitting in a cloud or in a mist somewhere. I don't know what's causing that, whether you have a filter on your camera or what. You know, that's a bit now you improve. Do you put a filter on your camera? Because sometimes, sometimes when people don't want their wrinkles to be visible, then they make it a bit murky like that, you know? Okay, so you are aware of it. You're doing it consciously. Fine. Let's get Joanne Yawich.
Okay, thank you. And my wrinkles are all very visible.
Highly visible, Joanne. Go ahead.
Thank you. And I want to pick up on the point that Happy was making. I made an offer in the chat to say that from the NPI side, we're happy to organize a 2 or 3 hour session, in-depth session, in which any of the commissioners who would be interested could get a much more in-depth presentation of the work that we've done, including looking at the assumptions and the data and the evidence that we've used in order to arrive at the conclusions that we have. So that is an offer. But what the conversation around it raises for me is what the potential of the commission is, because we all come from different constituencies and organizations with different perspectives and different interests and different priorities. And I think the opportunity in the commission is to be able to critically look at the work that we've all done and to try and understand where each of us is actually coming from in order to try and, I'm hoping, develop one plan, one national plan, and one set of outputs that to the greatest extent possible can incorporate the views of all stakeholders. So the work that we've done is a business piece of view, is a business view. And I think the significance of it is that before it was done, I don't think there were many CEOs in South Africa who thought that an energy transition was possible, let alone a net zero 2050 target could make sense for our country and could be implemented in a way that would not only ensure an orderly transition, but in a way that would actually grow the economy, grow the number of jobs, increase quality of life for people. And I think that what has happened through putting together a substantive evidence base has meant that you've started to be able to move a sector in relation to understanding that there are many options and opportunities and ways to go. And I think that's what the importance of it is. But I think that's also the opportunity that there is in this commission. And I think that where there are other pieces of work that have been done, it would be very useful to have them tabled. So for example, we know that the work that we've done is very similar to work that that has been done at the University of Cape Town, that has been done by the CSIR, and maybe a task for the commission, for the secretariat would be to look at what there is, do a desktop study in a sense and look at what work has been done and where have the conclusions of that work, where do they align or where do they divert? And that might be a very useful piece of work that would allow a conversation to be taken forward that could look at the kinds of issues that Desigan was also raising, which are not necessarily incorporated at this point. I think Desigan is talking about the things that we don't think about as South Africans or the things that we haven't incorporated. So that would be my proposal.
Okay, but Joanne, you're not exactly surprised that NGOs will say, "What is business up to? We got to
Not
watch."
at all.
You're not surprised, you know.
No, and it's an inherent part of this process anyway. Is that we do challenge each other. I think that's good.
Okay, Bobby Peake.
Thanks, Mr. Musa. The thing that I'm missing from the debate in our last meeting and in this meeting, and I think it has to be raised urgently, is the issue around understanding the health impacts of the present system and quantifying and making sense of that in terms of what are the implications in terms of what we choose on health going forward and the economic benefit of making a just transition actually be meaningful for people. So for groundwork, a just transition, Mr. Musa, is specifically looking at the delivery of services, not economic growth. And, you know, RDP houses, its design neglects energy consumption people get sick because they're cold in winter and hot in summer. And then you still have those very RDP houses sitting next to industrial areas, or industrial areas being placed next to those homes. So I think essentially what I want to really put on the table is, how do we bring health into this debate, into the NDC where it's not grounded, and into our debates going forward. Thank you.
All right. I think that those are all of the hands that we've had. We can go on to the next item. Crispian, I think we're happy with the way you've proposed that we proceed with concluding our views on the NDCs. And then, Joanne, you mentioned a longer and fuller presentation. Perhaps you may want to set up a session like that, where you do a fuller presentation to those commissioners who are interested. I would recommend it. I've heard the whole presentation, and I think it's worth listening to that and see how that thought processes have developed. So you could do that, or if you want the Secretariat to arrange it, I'm sure we could also assist you in doing that. And then it will be a good idea, Crispian, just to get some sense of what are the different institutions that have done similar work on low emissions pathway scenarios, and maybe we can put that together also. And I've got no doubt that the Commission will probably have to do some of its own work around that also.